Hi, I'm Andrea Lipinski.
And I'm Keith DeCandido. It's that time of year again when the temperature goes down, people buy large quantities of evergreens and candles, and It's a Wonderful Life is shown 487 times.
It's Christmas.
Yeah.
Or Hanukkah.
Or the winter solstice. Whatever you want to call it.
Right.
For the second year in a row, we're celebrating it here on the Chronic Rift.
And we have a whole episode of really neat stuff to show you, but first.
Marion Zimmer Bradley was on the East Coast over Thanksgiving for the Darkover convention. Marion is the author of The Mists of Avalon, an Arthurian novel, an excellent Arthurian novel, and the creator of Darkover, a world in which she's been writing stories and novels since the 50s. She was kind enough to stop by our studio on her trip, and here is a little chat that I had with her. Week for the annual Darkover convention. How did that go? And what exactly happens at a Darkover convention?
Well, I loved it, but of course that's natural because a lot of it is based on my books. I was the one who wrote the original Darkover stories. Now, of course, everybody and his idiot sister is writing them. But, well, what happens basically is a lot of fans get together and rent a hotel for the weekend and throw the world's biggest party. And then they have panels and a masquerade party and a dance party and so forth.
So you have people dressing up as free Amazons.
Yes. I remember when they were first talking about Amazons, there had been a masquerade where a lot of people had come as Amazons in basically 2 or 3 straps of leather. And I told Don Walheim that if he put a naked Amazon on the cover of my book, he could forget he'd ever known me.
How is that as working now with something, originally you wrote all the Darkover books, and now that it's grown into something where it's sort of a shared universe?
Well, some of them are very good indeed. Vera Nazarian, for instance, and Susan Schwartz. I printed her first story, and now she's doing an absolutely wonderful book about the Holy Grail. I read it, and for the first time, the opera Parsifal made sense. In spite of the fact that they had a Titurel who was about twice the age of, who was about half the age of Amfortas, and he's supposed to be his senile father.
Speaking of the Holy Grail, you wrote a wonderful, wonderful book on Arthurian legend called The Mists of Avalon, and a couple of years ago, James Coburn bought the film rights to that. What's happening with that?
Well, I gather he's trying to make it. He says he's still going to make it, and I gather he's still trying to raise money. And I've seen the first. A friend of mine has seen the script of the first episode, and she says it's wonderful.
So it's going to be a miniseries.
It's written by Rita Mae Brown.
That's good, because there's too much going on in that book to really make it into...
Well, at first they bought it for a movie, but they dropped the option because after Dune was such a disaster, they realized, well, I'm not saying anything bad about Dune, it's a wonderful book, but unfortunately you can't understand it unless you've read the book. You can't understand what's going on in the movie. They left everything out between the scenes. It's hard to translate a 1,000-page book into a 2-hour movie.
Did you, in the Darkover thing, world, you, and also in The Mists of Avalon, you played around a lot with gender roles.
I do that a lot.
Yes. How did the free, I'm curious, I'm especially interested in the free Amazons in Darkover, just because they're different. Were they part of the original setup?
No, believe it or not, they came out of a dream I had once. I had this very strange dream where kids were all over the place playing war games. And somebody came up to me and said, I like being a boy with the girls, don't you? No, she said, I like being a boy with the boys, don't you? And I said, I'd rather be a girl with the boys. And that was where the whole free Amazon thing got started. I feel like Dr. Frankenstein. It's the same way as when I started the SCA. Actually, we wanted to give a party in Diana Paxson's backyard. And I think she would have just dropped it there. But my husband, Walter Breen, and I were on the East Coast. And we were lonesome for the West Coast. And so we thought, well, we'll found a kingdom of the SCA. And we did.
And it's since grown into this.
Yes, it's a monster. As I say, just call me Madam Frankenstein.
In the Mists of Avalon, you created, well, that's actually the question. The druids in the Mists of Avalon were sort of, in a sense, the opposite of Christians in
Yes.
terms of patriarchy versus matriarchy. How did you come about that? I mean, how much of that was based on what little we know about the druids, and how much was your own interpretation?
Well, I read an awful lot about the Druids since I was a very young girl, since I was 13 or so. It started out when I was watching Bellini's opera Norma. I got fascinated by the idea of Druids, and then when I was a teenager, I spent a lot of time in the New York State Library, reading through a 10-volume book on religions. And one of those volumes, about yay thick, was called Druids and Druidism. And although I couldn't tell you now who wrote it, it influenced my life enough so that I've been working ever since. And the other influence, which I'm almost afraid to quote because it's so unintellectual, is the Prince Valiant comic strip. In that, Morgan was always this sinister figure stalking around in the background, and I thought she was so interesting, much more interesting than all the knights who just wanted to slash and bash.
What's coming up in the future? Do you have any writing projects?
Well, yes, I have 3 at the moment. Mercedes Lackey and I are working on a book called Rediscovery, which is in the Darkover series. It's the rediscovery of the original Darkovan colony by the Terrans.
Oh.
And I think it's going to be pretty good. And then the second one I had, it's being rewritten because the first draft was written right after my stroke and I did not do very well. And then the second book project I'm working on is called Return to Darkover, which brings Lou Alton's daughter Marja back to Darkover. And she's a musician. And I haven't nearly finished. I'm just about to bring Lou Alton back on stage. And it's about the 3 daughters of Regis Hastur had a sister called Javon, and she had about 6 children, and they're all in the book. And there's one scene that I think is rather amusing, where they try to marry Marja off to one of the 3 sons, and they don't much care which one.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on and for coming in on your furlough into New York.
My pleasure. Anybody. And that's why writers become writers. They love to talk about their ideas.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now we have with us 2 gentlemen who have both been on the show before separately, but who have never been on together before because they argue about everything. And now, but see, this makes great entertainment, or so we think. Now, here today to debate on the subject of story versus style, we have, on my right, John Ordover, an editor at Tor Books, who was last on our episode of Star Trek, and on the other side of Keith, Don Keller, who is on the staff of the New York Review of Science Fiction, and who last appeared on our episode of Ursula K. Le Guin. Gentlemen, go to it.
And you will get a signal so you know when to stop after about 3-4 minutes. John?
Well, basically, Don, it's my contention that the reason people read books is twofold. 1, to find out what happens next, and 2, to see what happens to characters they like. If a book actually has a great style as well, so much the better. But in fact, what people read for has nothing to do with the style of the book.
Well, the problem with that is, to quote Samuel R. Delany, when put in opposition to style, there's no such thing as content. And that, or story, or characters, or anything. All that you have is the words on the page. And the only way that you can, approach the characters or the story or the setting or anything else is through the medium of the words. And so, in a sense, the words are all that is important.
Yes, except that I would argue that, oddly, 95% of the people reading books are not reading the words. They are reading what happens. They do not hear the words. They do not care about the words. They're only skimming through, essentially, to find out what happens in the story. The best thing a style can do in that case is stay out of the way of the story, although I'll agree that the superior books are where the style is put at service of the story.
The thing is, though, that transparent style is a myth. Style, you have to say it in words, and the words have to, form meanings and create images in the reader's head, and you cannot get to what you're talking about without having the words there first.
What do you mean by, wait, before you jump in, what do you mean by transparent style, exactly?
I don't mean anything by transparent style.
Oh, okay. You think it's a myth, so it doesn't exist.
What Don, yes. What Don means by transparent style is instantaneously accessible to all readers style, a lowest common denominator style that stays completely away from the story, and there is such a thing. Most mass market books are in fact written in that non-style. The
That's
problem
a good
is
word
that,
for it.
yeah, well, no, I'll agree happily with that. Style can often serve, though, to make it more and more difficult to get through a book. For instance, such books as Greer Gilman's Moonwise, which are, for 95% of readers, fundamentally impossible to get through, because nothing is happening, and all you have is style.
Well, as a partisan of Moonwise, you well know, it's slow. There are some books like this which are slow, but which the richness of the style in itself keeps you reading and keeps you entertained.
But what do you mean by you, Don? Who do you mean besides you by you?
I am not the only reader I know who has thoroughly enjoyed that book.
That was the signal.
That's some signal.
Should it be a signal? This was very enlightening, I'm sure. Hello.
That's one of the most poised debates I've ever heard in my life.
Anyway.
I'm sorry we disappointed you.
Where's the bloodshed?
Yeah, we're disappointed. Anyway, up next we have our memorable moment. This memorable moment is one of the first pieces of animation ever done. It was done by Winsor McKay called Gertie the Dinosaur. And it was shown recently on... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong camera. It was done recently, just like my profile here, folks. It was done on Arts and Entertainment's Dinosaur Show, hosted by Walter Cronkite, which is why you'll hear Walter Cronkite's voice somewhere during the thing. By the way, you'll notice we haven't shown many memorable moments. That's because you haven't been writing in and sending them to us. Write to us. Here's the memorable moment.
Come on out, Gertie, and make a pretty bow. Gertie, don't hurt Jumbo. Gertie will now show that she isn't afraid of me and will take me for a ride. Alley-up.
Audiences everywhere were spellbound by Gertie the Dinosaur.
Okay, we now have with us the Comic Art Commentary portion, in which I will be talking to this gentleman right here, Chris Claremont, who was last on when we talked about heroes and villains, and he's going to be telling us what he's doing now, since you just left the X-Men, which you wrote for 17 years?
17 years, yes.
Some people watching the show haven't even been alive that long.
A good chunk of the audience currently wasn't alive then.
On that depressing note, so
I
what's...
don't know, I think it's quite an exciting note, actually. When you consider that when the book started, people who were reading it in their teens are now introducing it to their children.
Right.
That's remarkable longevity.
In any event, you're not doing it anymore for the
No,
first
I'm
time in
not.
17 years. So what are you doing now, since everybody seems to think of like Chris Claremont, writer of the X-Men, as if it was all one word?
Well, a number of projects. I'm just now waiting for the final art on the Star Trek graphic novel, Dead of Honor, which unfortunately, because of the lateness of the art, probably will not be on sale the 10th when it's supposed to be. I believe DC is now contemplating various publication dates sometime in the new year.
So it's going to miss the 25th anniversary, too.
Well, it's going to be a somewhat longer 25th anniversary than perhaps was first considered. On the other hand, the equation is, I suppose, either get it out on time or get it out the best possible book you can produce. And in this instance, I think they're opting for the best possible book they can produce. And considering the artwork by Adam Hughes and Carl Story, not to mention the story by me, I think it'll be worth the wait.
Okay. What else have you got planned?
What else? Well, I'm in discussion with Dark Horse to do a 12-issue Alien Predator limited series, which is going under the tentative title The Deadliest of the Species. I'm sort of playing to, I suppose, what is my notoriety or my strength, depending on your perspective, in that it's a female human, a female predator, and the alien queen, all teaming up together against people who are going to regret they ever saw them before. I'm doing an Excalibur graphic novel for Marvel that is currently at about 105 pages with Rick Leonardi and Al Williamson, entitled True Friends. I am talking about various projects with Marvel and DC, but most exciting of all, I am in, well, my agent, rather, is in final negotiations with Bantam Books for what looks to be a 4 graphic novel deal.
By Bantam?
Yeah.
Oh.
Be original material. 2 of them will be science fiction, and 2 of them will be Murata, the she-wolf, which was done by myself and John Bolton about 8 years ago. And we hope to have these out over the next 4 or 5 years. And they'll be deluxe format, 128 pages, full color, hopefully hardcover.
Okay.
And it should be very, very exciting.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing that.
My pleasure.
And next, we have Andrea is going to give you the next part of the show. Tell us, Andrea, what it is.
Hiya, Keith. I'd like to do a little number for you now. Sorry, this mic, it just brings it out in me. Well, now we have a retrospective of us, of the Chronic Rift. We've been on for 40 episodes. Have you guys been watching for 40 episodes? I haven't, no. Yes, we've all been watching for 40 episodes, but in case you haven't, these are some memories that we've had, the good ones, the bad ones, overall, the excellent memories. Here is a retrospective of the Chronic Rift.
Hello, I'm Judy Finari, and welcome.
Hello, I'm Andrea Lipinski.
And I'm Keith DeCandido, and
Welcome to the first episode of The Chronic Rift, a series dealing with news and commentary in the science fiction and fantasy genre. First up, a look at what's been going on. What? No award counts unless it's the Round Table Award. What the hell is she talking about, you may ask?
What the hell are you talking about?
I'm a member of the staff now, so I can get whatever I want. Nice about word balloons. It's very subtle.
Hey, look.
It's nothing like tooting your own horn, huh?
Well, no. What's wrong with tooting one's own horn? Who else's horn can one toot if one can't toot one's own horn?
Twin Peaks wasn't real.
I'm not going to say.
Stop shattering my childhood.
Childhood? Twin Peaks is a year ago.
Never mind.
We won't pursue this. Anyway.
All I'm going to say on the subject ever again, even if John puts it in the script, okay? Thank you. Yeah. Joining us now is Keith DeCandido, comic book critic at large. Keith is a regular contributor to the Comics Journal and will be featured every week in comic art commentary. Hi, Keith.
Hey, Judy. The second problem is that hobbits have hairy feet. Wenzel does not draw hairy feet. He draws ordinary feet that look like they have a thatch of fur glued on top of them. They are the most pathetic hairy feet I have ever seen. They're all things that are too abstract. Kind of, here's your brain. Here's your brain on postmodernism. Artists Eddie Newell and Mark Jones show cleavage at every opportunity and constantly have them in these slinky, sexy poses. It's the Malibu Graphics Incorporated style of putting out comics. Put 2 big boobs on it, the kids will eat it. That's it for Comic Art Commentary. I'm Keith DeCandido.
A major segment of our program is what we like to call the Round Table. In this segment, we discuss with a panel of fans and professional fans, or even professionals alike, the latest trends and concepts in the world of science fiction and fantasy. Is that true?
You're all barbarians.
Yes, we are all barbarians except Andrew. Andrew's Greek, he's not a barbarian. But the word has connotations of somebody who is evil, somebody you wouldn't want to invite over to dinner, you know. And it comes from a word that means somebody outside the village, basically.
I would never invite you to dinner. The other one, which is a British version of the cover, has nothing but TNA.
It's not even accurate.
No, it's not accurate at all, but it exploits TNA, and so you can see, you know, I mean, there are 3 big points on that book, and none of them have anything to do with the book.
There's another.
Just like in every other not having the code to see how much blood, gore, and guts and veins in your teeth that they can put in.
Veins in the teeth are one thing, oral sex is another.
Arthur come back as he was predicted to do, and let's have him come back in modern day New York. That way I don't have to do research. That's why Stephen King's always setting his book up in Maine. Right. You know? Yeah. Stephen King being sitting there going, it was dark and dreary and there was a mushed muskrat.
Is that what she comes off as, unfortunately to me, is that she is a Brit's caricature of what an American is like. She's all screaming and shouting and nasal tonality and
Dirty Harry with Hooters.
Okay, we don't have a clip for Ghost. So what we're going to do instead is have Andrea Lipinski and Orenthal Hawkins doing their rendition of the music from Ghost. Come on outside. Come on. Oh, my teddy bear. Okay, thank you, that's good, thanks. Okay, let's go. Thank you.
Do you think immortality's a good idea? You would like to be?
A good idea? Good idea.
I think I heard in there that you said it was a good idea. I just
well, I mean, is anyone here in favor of death? I mean, that's the alternative. And if so,
depends on who you're talking about.
Favor of the earth death, Ben.
Everything. Tell you what got me out of Star Trek fandom was the first movie, which was, whatever anyone else may say, it is abysmal. And when they went around in their little sort of, it was wonderful. It was better than Cats. I'm going to see it again and again kind of thing. I said, you guys are nuts.
One of the popular B movies that most people seem to forget is the Italio sword and sandal epics with, you know, Steve Reeves and his massive thespic skills.
One on each arm, right.
Yeah, basically, yes. You know, Steve Reeves, hi, I'm Hercules. Yeah. My lips never match the words.
Right.
And
if I was to take the complete Edgar Allan Poe works and go back in time and meet Edgar Allan Poe when he was 10 years old, and if I was to hand him this book and say, Edgar, do you want to be famous? Copy a story or poem out of this every now and then and have it published.
On my left, Greg Cox, an editor at Tor Books and the author of a forthcoming history of vampire fiction called The Transylvanian Library, who has had a little dental work recently.
We have to wrap it up now.
And I'm so glad that was him and not me.
All right, so our topic next week is going to be Quantum Leap, series or anthology. I know, I can't wait.
Guest,
Yes.
anticipation.
Okay, until next time, peace, love, and tie-dye. Thanks a lot.
Okay, it's time to pick the winners of the contest. Remember the contest we've been talking about for weeks? We have author Margaret Wander Bonanno here to pick the winners. First, the third prize. The third prize winner gets a Star Trek Star Wars collectible price guide, a pair of Spock ears, a Simpsons postcard book, and any 4 episodes of The Chronic Rift he or she wants.
And the winner is Sandra Carpenter.
Yay! Second prize. This is 3 Philip K. Dick reissues, 4 new releases from Baen Books, The Best Comics of the Decade Volume 1 from Fantagraphics, and any 4 episodes of The Chronic Rift he or she wants.
And the winner is William Charles Morrow.
Yay! Okay, first prize. This is the biggie. You get ready, 2 Worlds of Wonder tapes. Stranger in a Strange Land, the uncut version by Robert Heinlein, The Bradbury Chronicles, Thomas the Rhymer by Ellen Kushner, The Terminator 2 movie book, Comics Interview number 100, The Encyclopedia of American Comics from 1897 to the present, Marvel, 5 Fabulous Decades of the World's Greatest Comics, Harvey Kurtzman's Visual History of the Comics, a genuine The Chronic Rift t-shirt, all the books in that bookcase, and 4 episodes of The Chronic Rift that you want. Plus, all 3 winners are being invited back to the studio for our award show.
And the winner is Greg Poole.
Hey, Greg! Greg won. Congratulations, Greg. Now we got to wrap it up.
Yes.
We're going to be showing reruns until late January. Then we'll be back with a live episode, January 27th, 4:30, Manhattan Cable, The Church and Organized Religion and Science Fiction. So go and watch it. And that's it. Happy holidays.
Good night.
Get him in. Get him in.
This episode was sponsored in part by The Omega Zone, a store specializing in comic books and video movie rentals, including science fiction, horror, animation, and cult films you won't find at your local video store. Now in a new location, 258 West 15th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues in Manhattan. Telephone 212-645-6941. Doll Books Incorporated, publishers of Marion Zimmer Bradley and other writers of high-quality fantasy, science fiction, and horror since 1971. For a free catalog, write to Doll Books Incorporated, 375 Hudson Street, Department T, New York, New York, 10014. This episode was also made possible in part through the generous support of the Yellow Submarine, Bob, Grace Ann, John, and Helga.